Welcome to another episode of Diving into Finance. This week I'm joined by Vaughan Simpson, the FD for Value Dynamix, who is part of the Collinson Group. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Thank you, Luke. Thank you for having me.
That's all right. We've been having quite a long chat beforehand, though. We can't really go into all the details of it, but I think a great way to start would be just kind of find out a bit about you, your background. Obviously, you've been around the blocks. You started in practice, started obviously abroad, moved to the UK, but do you just give a bit of an insight into your career and go from there, really?
Yeah, so the accent will give it away. I'm a South African boy, born and bred. I grew up in Durban on the East Coast, avid rugby supporter.
No choice there, really.
No choice, really. You're born with biltong in the one hand and a rugby ball in the other. Attended high school at Durban High School, very prestigious school on the East Coast. Studied at the University of Natal, did my BCom and BCom honours, majoring in accountancy. Prior to that, I actually had dabbled with law. My passion was always around contract law in particular.
Any reason?
I think the whole thing's spawned out of having seen Jerry Maguire and thinking to myself, it'd be great to be a sports contractual lawyer or something to that extent. And I think that the leaning then in towards moving towards chartered accountancy came about with the show me the money sort of line. And I realized that there was potentially more opportunity for me to have more horizons to explore in the finance and commercials fields rather than law and going into a niche market that was sports contractual law, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s in South Africa with transitioning out of the apartheid era. Then moved into doing my traineeship, articles with Grant Thornton International. I very quickly established that as exciting as the world of auditing is, it was certainly not for me. I enjoyed more hands-on with owner-managed practice business, definitely getting involved in multiple different industries and getting exposure. And that's where Grant Thornton was wonderful for me to get a landing. And I'm very grateful to the partnership for having me there for 3 years. Then did a short foray into coming to London, and I arrived.
Was that straight away?
It was fairly soon afterwards. It was about 12 months after.
Yeah.
I did a bit of contract work and then came to the United Kingdom, and I arrived about 2 weeks before Lehman Brothers collapsed. So it was pretty poor timing.
Yeah, that's
unfortunate.
terrible. So you said you were obviously there for 3 years. Did you literally qualify and then be like, I've got my badge of honour here, I've done my time, I'm out, then London?
It was the plan. I'm on a South African passport, so I needed to apply for an ancestry visa. And that was a longer visa at the time than the highly skilled migrant visa. And I'm sure we'll touch on this a bit more later, the nuances of coming over and immigration and then finding yourself in a very diverse environment that has a multitude of nationalities, cultures, and finding your feet in the world that is London.
Yeah, I mean, London's a different beast, isn't it? Even in the UK, to be honest, if you compare it to other parts of the UK, it's like the epitome of everything, isn't it? Everything's on steroids. Like
it is the metropolitan capital of the world. It really is. It embraces everything. And I mean, there are very few cities that can compete with what London has to offer. In particular, I'm talking now in the finance sector. I love, obviously, with being involved in the Collinson Group, I get exposure to people from as far afield as Honduras to Shanghai. So we're a fully global company. And being what I do in the Value Dynamix aspect of the business is very tech-based, very strong technology offerings that are being designed and developed for our clients. So you get a lot of exposure in the London world. Friends of mine, I obviously have a lot of chartered accountant friends that have also immigrated, made some here. And the exposure that you get in the finance sector and across commerce is so vast. You just cannot get it in most other countries, certainly not in South Africa. It's very difficult to find the exposure that you could get here back home.
Well, I think a lot of companies have like their central finance function based in the UK, and then they're pulling all the finances from the different countries.
That's
and then you're
correct.
doing the reporting out there. So.
That's correct. We do exactly the same thing. We have our APAC region, we have EMEA, and we have the Americas, and obviously we are head office in London. But that is exactly it. We have 2,000 staff members dotted around the world, and in a finance capacity, we are consolidating all those various different entities into one global function centrally. So it is definitely an advantage to being from South Africa in my instance, because we were labeled the Rainbow Nation, and we have people of various different walks of life, various different LSMs, color, ethnicity, religion, creed. And I think that definitely puts me to some extent at an advantage to be able to come into such a diverse environment as London is.
No, I completely agree with you. And as you mentioned, we'll go through that in a lot more detail later on. I'm sort of interested in taking a step back because from speaking to loads of like people from a practice background, and even when I spoke to Mark from Millwall Football Club, who was also from a practice background last week, they've got I suppose quite a reputation, Millwall. But he mentioned that coming from a practice and moving into an industry, it was a completely change of pace. He almost said that, because he could clock off earlier. Yeah. He was like, he wasn't used to it. He wasn't used to like not sending emails at like 7, 8 o'clock, responding to like clients' queries and stuff like that. How did you find that transition?
Yeah, it's an interesting analogy that I reflect on. I once heard an audit partner from another one of the big four say that moving from specifically being in practice to industry and commerce is like going from game ranger to poacher. You literally have a complete change in mindset. In the auditing realm in particular, it's very structured, very rigid, very mandated by statute and what you can and can't do. It's also then got overlays with GAAP, depending on your region, IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards. So there are a lot of rules, and it can become quite cumbersome and limiting, I think, to somebody's creativity, for want of a better term. Whereas, and that's my opinion entirely, but moving into commerce and being afforded the opportunity to be creative and to find ways to build and structure finance and results that best reflect ethically the position of a company or a group of companies sat far better with me. And then also to get that exposure, and this is a personality trait for myself, because I don't consider myself a ordinary chartered accountant. I would say that getting into commerce afforded me the opportunity to grow across the different aspects of business. So I could get involved in HR, I could get involved in PR, I could get involved in operations and sales and marketing, which I have quite a lot of involvement currently with. And I really enjoy that aspect because I think it suits my character more than to be sort of pigeonholed into the traditional grey suit pocket calculator role that an accountant was.
I do think as well, when people start off in practice as well, you kind of, like you mentioned, get pigeonholed where you think that's what finance is.
Correct.
And then when you move into industry and, like you said, you start working with the sales team or the marketing or the HR and getting more of an understanding of the business, because your role as the finance professional is not just to do the finances, but it's to understand the business, the strategies, give important information so they can make key decisions. And when you're an auditor, you're not doing that because you're working with all these different clients who ultimately probably aren't happy that you're auditing them. I could be wrong.
They don't particularly want to pay the fee. It's a necessary evil. It's kind of like paying insurance. You have to do it. You don't particularly want to do it.
Well, yeah, I know from speaking to a number of clients, when it comes to year end and the auditors they're incredibly stressed, to be fair. And you understand why, because it's important that they've done all the reporting correctly. It's important that the audits are done.
I mean, they could have a lot riding on it. For example, the banks could be placing reliance covenants could be determined by having a clean audit report. So there is obviously a lot of stress for clients to get their house in order. And, for every overrun of an hour is a charge too. So there's an accountability aspect towards budget there for a client. Whereas the auditors, they've got their set tick box questionnaires that need to be addressed. Standards need to be upheld. controls need to be tested, etc. So there's a lot of things that the auditors need to get through in order to ensure that they are comfortable to give an unqualified audit opinion, which then third parties place an immense amount of reliance on. As I mentioned, finance houses are a prime example.
No, exactly. I think like you kind of hit the nail on the head there. When you're in audit, you're looking at all the technicals, aren't you? Everything must be aligned to a certain thing. And when you work for a specific client, you need the technicals and the controls to be in place. You can do your job. But that's only a fraction of what you're looking after as part of that overall.
It's true. And then also to touch on what you said, Luke, the team that goes in from an audit company, the various members of the team will be given specific areas of that business to go and audit. So someone might be given bank and cash. Someone might be given fixed assets. Somebody might be a specialist in derivatives because they're a senior auditor. So you become very much pigeonholed into that, and you might go to 5 different clients in 5 different months, but you only touch on certain aspects of the balance sheet. You don't get involved in necessary transaction testing, or maybe the other clients you do, but you're never getting a full business's entirety in one go. It wouldn't make economic sense and timing wise for a client to be audited in that way. So that, I think, is where, again, in my experience, I got quite fortunate in that with Grant Thornton. I got the opportunity to get involved in everybody from a pottery store to major hospital and healthcare groups in South Africa. So it was really from the little granny who does a little hobby and would do a pro bono, all the way up to multi-million rand audit fees type clients, which were huge.
No, and like you said, I think, when you're working in audit as well, they also sometimes specialise you in specific industries. Yeah. So sometimes you're like
that's true
vertical within a vertical within a vertical.
That is 100% true. I know that, for example, I was fortunate enough to, from year 1 to year 3 of my training contract, I was involved with a very prestigious jeweler franchise chain in South Africa. And I started off doing the very basic types of audit stuff, bank and cash, a few revenue transaction testings on invoices and whatnot. And by the time I was in third year running the audit as the audit senior, I was handling a lot more of the trickier stuff, especially around inventory and stock. You can imagine everything from gold dust to rare diamonds were part of that inventory. So
Jesus, that's got to be quite interesting.
It was fascinating.
I imagine you knew the value of absolutely everything.
Absolutely everything. So to give you an example of that, when the manufacturing workers were handed a piece of gold, it was weighed beforehand. And when they came in with their finished item and they had a sort of leather cloth trough above their laps to catch the dust, they had to weigh the dust and the finished good, and it had to equate to exactly by the gram what the issued out stock was.
Wow.
Yeah. And that had to be measured.
I could see why, though, because you're obviously dealing with stuff as well.
Yeah.
So much money. And even a gram here, a gram there, if you lose that continuously and you're dealing with, like I said, if they're very prestigious, they're obviously dealing with high volumes of that material.
Correct.
So, it's not cardboard.
No, it's not. And then you get sent on the most horrendous of stock counts where you are counting beans. So you're counting broad beans, coffee beans, all these different types of soya beans and whatnot. And literally you do become a bean counter.
Wow.
So we've been there too. Counting charcoal and having to throw your jeans away afterwards because your jeans are ruined from all the charcoal.
You had to go out and actually count.
Had to go and count and then weigh charcoal. I've had to do stock counts for cyanide. So you weigh it.
Cyanide?
Cyanide.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's obviously quite lethal.
I mean, there's very specific protocols.
I'd rather count the beans, to be honest.
There's very specific protocols around how you do these sorts of things. But yeah. It's all got a value, so it has to be find its way onto the balance sheet as an asset, and it's inventory for certain companies. So you've got to value that inventory and you've got to value it accurately.
Wow, I mean, yeah, that sounds a pain. If I'm honest.
No pun intended.
Yeah. And then you moved into management, quite early on to be your career. Not only did you move from a practice, and then you moved into management. That's got to be really challenging because number one, you're now looking at the full picture of finance.
Yes.
You're then in a management position.
Yes.
How did you go about that? What were the kind of challenges you faced? Because I think management means you can be one of the hardest jobs because you're not just looking after one thing. You're trying to motivate your team, keep them interested, make sure you're not losing, like obviously staff, ensuring that, they're delivering a job, and then you have to like manage people and so on. Like it's a hard, all-encompassing role. I think sometimes people think managers just twiddle their thumbs and look at spreadsheets and make sure you've entered the right numbers. It's
particularly difficult, as you point out, when you're young. I mean, I was still in my late 20s. So to go in as a late 20-year-old wet behind the ears in the view of many of my more senior aged colleagues was a tricky situation to get into. I'm personally quite a determined person. I'm probably be regarded as a type A. But one of the narratives I always like to use with people I work with or any one of my day-to-day dealings is the old adage of you catch more bees with honey. So I try to just be as nice and approachable as I can be. I think the underpinning needs to be that I didn't get to the opportunity of being afforded management roles without having the academic and nuance to understand how the job is done. The soft skill side of it, I think it certainly helped that I was in my youth involved in a lot of team sports. Fortunate enough to play when I was younger in more senior teams. You learn very quickly, sport mirrors life, how to adjust without changing your performance. So you're there to perform a job, but you've got to get the combination right amongst your players and your team to be able to achieve a group result, and that would be the win. So from me going in, I remember in particular with one contract that I did, I was, I think, in my late 20s, about 28, 29, thought that I was bulletproof. It was great. And I walked into the boardroom and 4 of the finance directors that were going to report into me, and I was the holding role between them and the CFO of the group, which had listed at that stage. Those 4 FDs were all in their 50s. So they literally were old enough to be my father. And I can tell you that a few of them were rather unimpressed that they had not been afforded the opportunity. So I was already on the back foot. The way I dealt with that situation was just to literally get them all together. So I felt if I can either take the divide and conquer and go one-on-one with each of them, or there seems to be a commonality here. They all don't really want a youngster here. So let's get them all in the room together. They can all, if they need to, team up and we can address all of them at the same time. And that way I can crush it all at the same time, or I can adapt how I need to all at the same time to the same issue. And that is the perception of youth and inexperience. So, and frankly, people's perceptions become their realities.
No, I agree. I presume you went with all of them at the same time.
Yes.
Because I was going to say, like, my experience of management as well is you do one-on-one. Like, sometimes the message that you've portrayed, even though you feel like you've portrayed it exactly the same, gets lost in transition.
Correct.
And then when they come together and stuff like that, one person has an opinion that or like believes you said something in a different way, and then like what that does, sorry, my laptop's kicking off, and you have those like dividing things that then create more dividers, rather than if you have that conversation all together, everyone's aligned, everyone's had the same conversation.
Absolutely.
Like,
and the benefit is that if you have an issue with 4 and suddenly one thinks, oh, that's actually not so much of an issue anymore, it's far more likely for the other 3 to see that and then realize that whatever the issue was has already been understood and appreciated by one other. They'll start to question their stance on it. So by the time that meeting had concluded, I think it was fair to say that the 4 had become one, still had a bit of an issue. And then it was easy for me to say, no, I mean, the gentleman's name was Gary. He won't have an issue being named. He ended up becoming a very good friend after. And I just said to Gary, until today, until he hears this. And I was like, Gary, come, let's go after work and go grab a beer. And we just sat, and I said to him, look, you must understand from my perspective how daunting it is to have to direct and instruct 4 incredibly successful, smart, experienced men towards a common goal. I'm not here to change what it is you do, but I'm here to maybe refine certain aspects to get better efficiencies out of what we're doing. It did help also that at the time there was a financial transformation systems that needed to happen. And none of them were equipped to do that. And hence why the youthful, exuberant chartered accountant came in, because I could steer that. I had the experience to do so, whereas they didn't. And I said, I am just here for a short period of time to bridge that gap for you guys, to make your lives actually much easier when I do go. And thereafter, we were A4 away. We were absolutely sailing, and we crushed it. It was wonderful, and I worked really well with those 4 guys.
Well, that's really good. I think when you're a contractor as well, coming in to deliver a project as well, sometimes that creates barriers.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, often contractors get paid quite well. And when you're in finance, there's no hiding from it. They see what your either PO is worth, your day rate or your hourly rate and stuff like that. And then if you add another, I suppose what you could say is like barrier, the fact that you're much younger than them. And,
correct.
Sometimes ultimately there is jealousy, there is concerns around with any job, with anything, like from that perspective.
It's so sorry to interject, but it's so important to keep whatever aspects of positivity and motivation exists already. Sometimes what happens is you're brought in simply because the team is stale and you're there to, new broom sweeps clean, get some of the older archaic thinking out of the way. And that has been a part of my career too. It's not a pleasant thing to do, but ultimately the company needs to move on. And sometimes there are a few sticks in the mud that are reticent to move with the times or move with the viewpoint of how the company or the board of directors see the vision for the company. And I'm not saying that necessarily comes with age, because I know people that are in their 60s that are very dynamic, super versatile, adaptable. And I get certain 24-year-olds that know everything and don't want to listen to reason. And who are you to tell me what to do? And it's a very different kind of, animosity to have to deal with, where, it's generational, I suppose, to some extent, where you have to deal with those people's opinions and work it to a greater purpose, and that is the company's well-being. It's not about my personality or my happiness at the end of the day. It's about getting the job done to the best ability of pleasing as many people as possible while still having the company achieve what it needs to achieve.
No, exactly. And I think everyone's an individual, aren't they? Like some people take criticism really well and move on from it. Some people take it horrendously. And managing it. I agree, putting that positive foot forwards, because I say every business, there's points where you might have a mood hoover. Someone that sucks the energy out of a room. You're like, God,
an energy vampire.
Yeah, why is Gary in there sucking that? Or
we're picking on Gary again.
Poor old Gary, sorry, Gary. But someone that's literally almost challenging the overall. So you can have the overall consensus, everyone's driving in the right direction.
Absolutely.
But one person putting in the wrong direction, and it's almost like a disease that can affect other people in the team, and then you notice the negativity, and that builds up until sometimes, like you said, you have to make sure everyone is aligned with where you want either the business or what the strategy from the leaders are. And I agree, if you get that positive outlook internally, it makes everything so much easier. It makes working in a team nicer.
I think about it the same as football management in the United Kingdom. So I'm a huge Liverpool fan for my sins. And
so am I.
I'm fantastic.
A plastic fan.
Okay. Terrible season this year, unfortunately, but we'll bounce back. It's our favorite saying. Next year is our year. So you look at people coming in to a team that somebody else has built and developed, and the new manager comes in. He's got the same staff as what the previous manager brought in. Those people were there and playing for that manager. Now that manager's gone. So the challenge is to come in and get your style of how you like things to be done, because you have a vision, and get that buy-in to that vision. And the first thing that you'll see in football teams is those that don't buy into the vision are usually either let go or sent on loan, or whatever the case may be. And I think that is largely because if you have a basket of apples and you have one rotten apple, the good apples won't make that rotten apple good. The rotten apple will make all the rest bad. So you've got to just, it's a rip the Band-Aid off, get rid of that rotten apple. And it's quite a clinical approach. I suppose being a direct South African helps with that. But at the end of the day, I I think that that's the biggest challenge in management, coming back to your point about management and the transition, is the ability to, first of all, identify who's on your team and who's not on your team. Even though you've now adopted this team, who's going to play to your vision and who's not. And that is the most important thing to do. Then see if you can get those people on side or not. And if not, then you need to make the tough decisions. And that is not for everybody. Not everybody is management, cut out to do that. I know a few of my good friends are very happy to sit under the radar and they don't want to, have to make those tough decisions around people. I enjoy making the tough decisions because that, I think, defines my success personally for my growth as a chartered accountant.
I mean, it's very different. Obviously, I'm a manager within a recruitment company, essentially. But my first, when I went to management, I didn't realise all the different challenges. People are people and all the different things. Exactly. Like you said, there's been a lot of learning around. I've been in situations where you've got that bad apple, but they were performing well in their vertical. So, from a recruitment perspective, they were billing. But what that meant was that had a knock-on effect to other people around them, which actually brought their levels down. And then, ultimately down the line had to make a decision. And when that person, you saw everyone step up. Yeah. And it's so interesting when you see that, and you actually see that work, because it's like you said, sometimes a real challenge depending on the seniority of that person. And as a manager, you're kind of scared about making that decision because you're like, that person actually does a really good job, etc. But their attitude has a massive knock-on effect to the rest of your team. Yeah. And it actually makes it worse. You don't realise until you go through that process and you're like, oh, God.
Yeah. I think just, again, I'm full of sports analogies just because I'm sports mad. In South Africa, we say we were bossies about sport. But currently I play water polo down in Sutton, or Sutton Cheam. And I think about a team and your different roles within a team. Not everybody is a wing, or not everybody's in the pit fighting for the ball to score goals. There's a goalkeeper who's got just as important a role as anybody else in that team. And that's how I try and, catch more bees with honey, as I try and give the team and every member of that team, whether you are the tea lady or the sales director, you all have a very important role to play in the achievement of the overall goal, whether that is a financial or a social impact or whatever it may be that has been set by the board. We're all stakeholders in that. We're all part of a rugby team. You and I were discussing rugby prior to this, and
in a lot of detail.
Exactly. Well, it has to be. I mean, South African, so got to be in detail. But if you look at the various roles, not everybody's a fly half. Not everybody's kicking the points. Sometimes you've got to have somebody who does the dirty work at hooker. You've got to have your glory boys on the wing that can dot the ball down and are quick and little whippets. But you also need somebody who's dependable under the high ball and is willing to take a crushing tackle at fullback. Everybody has a role to play. And if one of those roles is not executed well on the day, that could be the difference between the W and the L. So that's the kind of mentality I try to, give over to my team within a finance context, is whether you're a debtors clerk or you're a creditors supervisor, or you're the FM or the F, it doesn't matter what your title is. Ultimately, to me, it gives obviously a degree of seniority. I understand that. But every single one of us, whether we're raising purchase orders accurately or whether we are, concluding on tender deals, all of these are so vitally important. So nobody, to me, is more important than the next person.
I completely agree with you. I've always thought about it. Before into every company I worked for, you are on the same team, right? You're all going into battle every day for the same thing. Obviously, I'm from a sales recruitment background. But you would notice if you went to the back office and stuff like that, where you can see who's on the team, who wants it, do you know what I mean? And who's willing to put into it.
You can see the hunger. Sometimes you can just see the hunger in someone. Sometimes you can see someone who just needs a little bit of hand-holding and a little bit of direction that they maybe had lacking from a previous manager. I know when I came into my current role as FD of Value Dynamix, and the Collinson Group is so big.
It's massive. I was doing quite a lot.
It is big.
The travel and tech and all that.
we're a large, people are welcome to go and do their research on the Collinson Group. It's a lovely big company and it's a wonderful, wonderful environment. But my joining in the Value Dynamix aspect of the business, tough times coming out of COVID, and the tech sector's taken a hammering in the last 12 to 18 months. I mean, some of the major competitors out there have lost over 80% of their market cap. So it's a very, very, very tough world out there. And there were certain people that I think were very concerned about, well, where does this leave us? Where does this leave this, division in the group? And are we the ugly duckling, or are we actually just getting really well positioned with our development to launch into, greater revenue streams and whatnot? And that has actually proven to be the case for us. We really are well positioned. But the point on staffing and just seeing that there are certain people that just sometimes need a little bit of TLC. And that's another one of the challenge of going into management is you need to have multifaceted approach. I can't just be one-dimensional Vaughan going and chatting to, Gemma, Jenna, Bookie. There's a lot of different names. Daniel, Calvin, whoever I need to chat to. I can't just take the same approach with every single one of them. I've got to almost to a degree empathize with their situation, empathize with what it is they do. And empathy is an incredibly underrated part of being an effective manager, I believe, in finance. It can be such a cold, lonely place, finance. So to have a bit of empathy and to align with, someone has a 3-year-old's birthday party coming up, that's a huge deal to them. Them working maybe until 11 o'clock every single night for you as a business and you as a manager is because they're showing loyalty to you. Repay that loyalty and let them take the Friday off. Like it's not the end of the world. They'll make it back because they are loyal to you and they believe in you, and you now have a personal bond beyond just the numbers, beyond just the processes and the computers and laptops. You actually are a person then, not just a boss.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people struggle with, is that empathy piece.
I think it's quite rare.
Because that's not everyone can be a great manager. You can be great at your job.
Correct.
I think it takes quite a special person to, manage effectively. And like you said, you have to treat everyone as an individual. You're almost doing like a SWOT analysis on each person, so you can understand. Okay, what are their concerns? How can I help them? What are they doing great right now? Is there anything in their background? Because the more you do it, the more you realise you know everything about your team. Generally, when you get to a point, you know a lot about your team and stuff like that, and having the empathy at certain positions within there. Sorry,
we have somebody crawling under the table.
Yeah, I was wondering what was going on there.
Is this normal for a podcast?
No, that's a different podcast.
I feel like I'm Howard Stern.
I think that empathy piece is really challenging, and like a lot of people in finance, I think finding finance leaders can be one of the most challenging things. I think because a lot of people are in finance, they're incredibly intelligent. You have to be in order to identify it.
You got to know your stuff.
And I think people are gifted in certain ways. We're all born with like certain gifts or have certain gifts that are adopted. And often when you're really technical and you're great at like accounting, you understand all the IFRS, the GAAP, all the different things around revenue recognition or lease accounting, IFRS 15 or the M&A and all that other stuff. You might be brilliant at that, but being able to show someone empathy because, their auntie's birthday's on Tuesday and they want to bake a cake or whatever it might be.
Or their child has their injections to go for. I mean, these are critical things. And I think if COVID has taught us one thing is that you very quickly can identify who'll get the job done. Like, to me, at the end of the day, it's not the whole adage of you're paid to do a job. I look at it as, we are paid to do a job, but we spend 8 to 10 hours of our day, 5 days a week in an office or working on a computer at home or both. And we spend a lot more time than we care to imagine with our colleagues or interacting with our colleagues and with our stakeholders and our suppliers, etc., than we sometimes do with our own children. And to not have that sitting as a manager in the back of your head and to just be, the grindstone driver, get it done. We've got this deadline. It's work day 8. Where is my results? yes, they know that. They're not stupid. They've got those same, reminders in their diaries. I find that allowing people that are adults to act like adults will bring more out of them than micromanaging them. I know from my perspective, I made it very clear to any prospective employer that it's just not in their best interest to want to micromanage me, because I don't work well in that environment, because I do feel very constrained, that I have to monitor the 10 minutes I took to walk to go and make a coffee. Doesn't sit well with me, because I'm going to make a coffee regardless of whether you tell me to record it or not. I just want to make sure that you know.
That's quite a degree. 10 minutes.
I know. I've heard. I know.
To be fair,
I was actually on a Facebook group a few days ago, and I think it's called Sapphire's Living Abroad or something like that. And a woman was complaining about a job that she'd just recently resigned from because of the fact that it was so pedantic, the level of micromanagement, and having to account for 10-minute slots throughout your day. That's a lot of time to have to account for.
That's creating a job, isn't it? In itself, the amount of time it take you to just write down every 10 minutes of a day.
It's ludicrous. And I understand that sometimes time is billable and chargeable, and there are roles like that in this world. I get that. But certainly from my side and in the environment I currently find myself, that's not the case. I think we have quite a degree of flexibility. I mean, again, another part of being effective in management is understanding the tools that you have at your disposal to assist your staff where needs be. And again, that's where Collinson are very good. We have a multitude of different groups. We have many different apps that we can patch into, whether it's for our medical purposes or mental wellness. We've got a lot of those on standby. So they've gotten it right and the balance good. Whereas a lot of employers sort of literally drive home the point that we have a deadline to meet.
Yeah, I mean, even during COVID, there were some companies that literally had stuff where they could track, like whether you're online, what you're doing, etc., time online and stuff like that. And I think it creates the wrong environment. I think, as an employer, you have to trust your employees. It's a mutual decision.
Yeah.
You've hired them, but they've also chosen to join your business or join your company, join your culture. You want them to obviously, showcase the values that you have as a business and stuff like that. But if they aren't doing their work when you want it, you don't have to mind, because it just puts people off. It's like with anything.
It does. It is a fine line between trusting your staff and getting the best out of them and getting your bang for buck. I like to always think that whilst it's a fine balance between you have a minimum of, say, a 40-hour week, but you also have a product to deliver. If you can do that in, say, 26 hours, I'm not saying that you shouldn't work for the 14, but maybe there's a reward in being able to be so efficient at doing your job that there is a promotion into another role with that person, rather than just saying, oh, they're really good at their job, let's just give them more work and more work and more work to fill up that 40 hours. So it is a very fine balance to strike in management in that regard.
Okay. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I think we covered management for quite a while.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that was really interesting when we initially had that conversation was around when you first moved here. I think, and even now, I think you said one thing you noticed from a lot of employers is the fact that they put UK GAAP as a key requirement. And you mentioned around the sort of IFRS and how, it's the international financial reporting.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think a lot of UK employers view UK GAAP as like a really key thing, even though, they would have covered a lot of that within
IFRS? I think that, and this is just in my experience when I came over here a few years ago. So first of all, there's two aspects. There's in-house recruitment, and then there's external recruitment agencies. And I think that sometimes what happens with the internal recruitment is that a generic role spec will go out, and because the company is UK based, immediately the person putting the spec together, who might not be in finance, goes, UK GAAP and international financial reporting standards. And those become hard points, as opposed to understanding that whether I'm doing South African GAAP or UK GAAP, there are incredible amounts of similarities and crossovers. And being a chartered accountant is globally accepted and transferable skill and resource. that does not prohibit you going into a foreign country's reporting legislature and standards. We are equipped to do so. We are trained to do so, and we are educated to do so through our board exams. Then the overarcher is, as you mentioned, IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards. Those are global, bar for maybe the US. They like to do things a bit different.
Oh, yes.
But they do have Sarbanes-Oxley and a few other things and slightly different ways of how they report taxes and things like that. But in general, globally, whether you're in Australia or South Africa or the UK, the crossover for GAAP, generally accepted accounting practice, is exactly that, quite general. So to have somebody who's not an accountant draft a spec, or they've got a generic spec, passed it to a recruitment agency who doesn't understand the capabilities and the skill sets that a chartered accountant brings to the equation to tick that box, is a big barrier to entry for, as certainly was for myself and for a number of chartered accountants coming over. And that is why I find that a lot of newly qualified chartered accountants coming over from South Africa will go into a Deloitte or a PwC or an audit firm and go into practice, because that's the bridger to getting some UK experience on the CV. It's not about necessarily the UK GAAP, but getting UK experience. And again, for me, I turn around and say, well, working on listeds on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, or for companies that were listed on the NASDAQ, how is that any different to working on a FTSE listed here? It's much of a muchness, and it shouldn't be a barrier to entry. And that's unfortunately something that I found. And that's why I think some younger CAs take that route. It's far harder for someone of my youthful age to come in and, with CFO experience and FD experience, come in and try to counter the argument of, but we need UK experience. You haven't dealt in a UK environment with a UK GAAP and a UK, but I say, but whether you're doing a balance sheet in Birmingham or in Brussels or in Cape Town, it's a balance sheet, and there are standard sets of rules and how you will get it done. There might be one or two nuances, but we are trained through our examination processes to be able to pick those up very quickly. You've got your handbooks, you've got Google, you've got whatever you need to be able to get it done. But the basic underlying knowledge is there regardless of where you're from.
No, and again, I completely agree with you from that perspective. I think, we've had it before where, clients are very specific. So like a finance manager would be like, they must have UK GAAP experience, and they must be able to, or have done this before. And that's the barrier to entry. Yeah. It's very rare that a client will send a generic job spec and go to a recruiter, go hunt, because we wouldn't work like that. Because one of the things we always find is you just get sent a JD. It's so generic. I mean, it's literally a tick list of they must be qualified. They're like, yeah, we know. We know it's a qualified.
It's a given.
Yeah, it's a qualified role. And then they're like IFRS 15 revenue recognition or 16 leasing or whatever and stuff like that. But it doesn't really tell you what the culture's like there, what the key deliverables are from a day to day.
So important.
If they're working with like sometimes we work with international businesses where it's like, okay, what countries? Are there any countries that would be great if either they've worked in that environment before? Because for instance, if someone's working with a German based client, very different from a French or a Spanish, just their whole working ethos and the hours, etc. It's very, very different. But I agree with you completely. And sometimes, it's a leadership with a business I want someone that's proven they can do UK GAAP. They've done their entire experience is IFRS, which you go. It's like you said, the general accounting practices from that is exactly what it is. I
think that's also what's allowed us to have a great conversation and to develop a professional relationship is that with Into, you find in my dealings with, say, for yourself and Daryl, there's an understanding, a broader and deeper remit understanding as to what a chartered accountant is capable of doing. So whilst if somebody puts on a job spec must speak French, I can't speak French. But if they are must be able to do evaluations and modeling on net present value, IRR, etc. Well, I can do that. I can do that regardless of where I am. Must be able to take management account to financial audit and deal with auditors, or whether I deal with an auditor in Liverpool or Leeds or London or Durban, then I'm still going to deal with auditors either way. And I might be, say, not a specialist, as you rightly point out, on like IFRS 4, for example. The fact that I've covered that in my underpinnings to becoming a CA, I literally would pick up my handbook, consult with my network if I didn't have an understanding, and that takes 5 to 10 minutes, and I'm on track. So I think that there is a broader thing that needs to be considered when hiring a chartered accountant to go into an FD or a CFO role, or any role for that matter, that's management or higher. And that is whether they're in fact a fit for the organization. A cultural fit is a lovely cliche term that's used out there. But literally, I think that is the first thing that I would look for if I'm going to hire someone is, can I work with this person? There are two things that I'll look for when I'm going to hire somebody is, do they have a good attitude, and are they trainable? Because it's pointless having a great attitude, but you're as dumb as a stump. Or,
it's true. It's very true.
You're super smart, and this talks to what you were mentioning earlier. You're super smart, you've got it together, you're cracking, but your attitude stinks. Neither of those two situations work. I need somebody who's got a great attitude and are willing to learn and teach me, frankly, as well. It's both downward and upward appraisal. I want to learn from my staff members that I hire, because I hire them because they know something that maybe I don't. An ex-CEO of mine, when I was in hospitality, said, never be the smartest person in the room.
I see it all the time.
I love that, because frankly, I just want the information to come to me so I can make decisions. And that is what I look for in a hire. And those two factors are important: attitude, trainable.
No, I agree. And it goes back to your team analogy. You want someone that you would like play for your team. Yeah. And you can see that. You can see where they're going to fit. Are they a winger? Are they a centre? Are they a forward? Are they a hooker? Like, what are their strengths? And can they add to that? And
you know, they obviously, by getting selected in your team, they will bring something to the others for sure. But are they going to just come in and stay at that level, or are they going to grow and the team is going to get better and better? Because other teams out there are going to learn about what it is you do. And this is in a sport and in a commerce perspective. Our competitors in the market will certainly be seeing, what is it that the Collinson Group are doing? Wow, they're setting the world alight over there. We need to take them on over there. And if we just stay at a certain level and content pace, we will be overtaken by the competition. So you have to constantly be evolving. You have to constantly evolve and re-engineer what it is you have. You know, what would you kill off? What would you enhance? And that, to me, is really important when you're making a hire, is to be able to see that that person has the ability to go with that transition, that they're not the stick in the mud type or reticent to change or evolution, as I prefer to use.
Yeah. And I think one of the things goes back to as well, something I always look for is like, you know, do I think they'd be comfortable to challenge me? And what I mean, by that is like, if you're making a decision, like, it's really important. Like, no one's perfect, and especially in leadership, you can't be perfect.
Yeah.
So sometimes you might make the wrong decision, stuff like that. But it's important that you have people around you that are comfortable, because, like you said, you've been hopefully open, honest. You know, like, everyone knows all their structures, but they're comfortable to like have a conversation and challenge, and not in a negative way.
Oh yeah.
But someone that's willing to like actually have a discussion about, you know, either the changes or systems or whatever it is, or like the vision or anything. So like you can have an open discussion about either why that decision's been made, and hopefully bring them on board, or actually go like, actually, you're right. Like, and that goes to like remote working. I know loads of companies, like, it's boring to death to talk about it, but flexibility or loads of different things within it. It could be benefit package or stuff like that. Having an open conversation, saying it, like we say all the time, we speak to clients and go like, look, your package is missing this. This is what your competitors are doing. And they're like, really? And then you like highlight, you're like, well, they're in the same sector, they're doing the same thing. These are exactly what this is their growth plan. This is what they're doing, and you're either below or above. And like some like clients are like, oh, that's awesome. Like, you know, we're actually, you know, beating the competition in terms of, or they're like, okay, might have to review that, or just like trying to highlight that, because I think you have to be challenged. If you're not challenged, like it's a disappointing journey from either a manager or from an individual. If you're in the team, you want to feel like you're going somewhere. I think that's really.
I think that's fantastic, and it speaks to team structures. If you look at our World Cup winning rugby team in 2019, we had Sia Khaleesi as captain and Rassie Erasmus as the coach manager, and Sia is effectively the conduit for the team and Rassie, and that is so important, I believe, in most organizations. So I have a person that I can depend upon in my current team. She's brilliant. Hello, Gemma. She's
Gemma
really.
Gary. Gemma's getting a good shout out. Yeah.
Gary's a thing of the past. It's all about Gemma now. No, she's really good, and she is my seer. She's definitely my seer, and you need to be able to have that person that you can depend on, because I can't do it alone. Mm-hmm. It's like you say, I can't be perfect. I can't be making 100% of the decisions 100% correctly all of the time by myself. That would be incredibly arrogant to think that I could do that, and foolhardy. I am fortunate, and I know that in other divisions within the group, there are right-hand men and women to the FDs that are really, really good and solid and dependable. And that, I think, is so important to setting yourself up for success. It's not about creating loads and loads of layers, but you need somebody, I think, that is, like your Robin to Batman. You need someone who's there that you can call upon, that if, for example, you're on leave, that person can hold the fort while you're gone. When that person goes on leave, I'm in a position to pick up a bit of their slack. It's really important, and it also gives a lot more kudos to you as the manager if you can show that you aren't above that, if that makes sense. You're willing to get in the trenches, walk the walk, not just talk, not just sip the coffee on your 10-minute break.
Yeah.
You're willing.
Okay?
See you later. It's been great. You like the chap from the office, just walking around.
Oh, is it Dave Brent? Is it Brent?
Oh, I can't remember his name.
You don't know? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is Brent.
Definitely a big analogy there. But yeah, I mean, it's so important to be able to do some of the stuff that your staff can do, because it earns respect, frankly. Often it'll be a case of, I could totally do that person's job, and then they realize, oh, hang on, that's a tougher job. Oh, gosh, now I know why they look at me with a bit of a squiff eye.
Yeah, I think when you're looking down on other people, I think that's the challenge. You forget where you started, because everyone started at the bottom.
Correct.
And going back to your point, when you say, like, I think a lot of people probably listening and stuff probably work for someone that's really arrogant, thinks they never make a mistake. But some of the best things that have come out of my career, if it's put it from there, is like by making big mistakes. Yeah. Because it's only from the mistakes that you learn and you strategize, you speak to people, and then you understand, the direction you need to take it to, or you've learned from it, so that won't happen again. Like that, I think that's scarring. It's like if you, if you're doing like weight training and stuff like that, or running, or whatever, like where you learn is from continuously going to failure, or upping the weight again and again and again. You soon learn like how your body adapts to that, and that training like leads into a success. Same in like rugby or anything. Like it's through repetition and through failures when you've like missed a tackle, or you've let your team down. Like that feeling of, I don't want to do that again, is what motivates you for the next game. So you then want to prove yourself because of that failure that you might have had.
It's a core human thing to want to instinctually protect against trauma. And whilst losing a sports match is a degree of trauma for some, the learning that comes from that is what then protects you. Our minds are designed to try to release the memories of pain, and to move forward from that is building coping mechanisms, or reading whatever it is that builds you further forward to get away from that pain. That's just how we are instinctually.
Psychology. So
I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a Jordan Peterson, but I can tell you that I've read a few books on that, and it is incredibly powerful just how resilient we are as beings. And in a work environment, it's exactly that. It's just, if you're constantly bashing your head every single day and you feel like you haven't been given the guidance, the direction, the training to be able to move past that, that's when you start to become quite stale in your role. And as a manager, it's a people manager, it's really important to identify that very quickly, because you've got to help someone get away from their failings through learnings to achieve success. It's a very, very, very important part of that.
No, exactly. Otherwise you lose people, and if things don't go the way that you maybe wish. I suppose that brings me on to culture.
Yeah.
Like, you mentioned obviously diversity and inclusion is like really important to you and Collinson Group as a whole. I know you look after one area of that. You mentioned obviously it's a very diverse business. You work in all these different countries. Right? It has to be. Like, what is the kind of culture? Like, you joined Collinson for a reason. What was it that you liked about them that sort of brought you into that business? And what do you like? How do you impact that culture, like from a management perspective down? Because it's got to be challenging.
It's a fantastic question, that. So I'll try and peel it away a bit, a layer at a time. So when I joined the Collinson Group, the appeal was, first of all, the size and the magnitude and the reach was very attractive. I was interviewed by a chap who became... he's the managing director of Value Dynamix, James. He's Croydon boy, born and bred, I believe.
I don't know if I've ever actually been to Croydon, to be honest. Have you been? Is it nice?
It's a bustling metropolis of Croydon. It's amazing.
Elle's kind of shaking her head as if it's not that great.
Given where you've told me your missus is from, it's kind of like the Bluff back in Durban.
I still haven't been, mate.
You're missing great food.
Well, yeah, she said there's a lot of curries. Oh, sorry, off subject, but yeah, like
loads of curries.
My wife's also from South Africa. Probably should have said that, and she's from Durban, from the Bluff. Like when we first had that conversation, which I didn't realise. I think that's quite a UK thing. I didn't realise like how segmented like South Africa is, or like anywhere. I suppose it's like if you look at the UK, London, like I said. Very different. If you went from London and then you went up north to like Inverness in Scotland, you'd think they're almost like, well, they are two different countries, but it's still part of the UK.
It's like for sure. So yeah, I mean, the attraction with James, I mean, he's from Croydon, and then interviewed also by a lovely lady named Nicola, and she's very senior in finance in the group, overarching a number of the different areas of group finance. And she's Irish, very Irish, and she's lovely. And that was already a little bit of the taste of what was to come. I then met the founder, Colin Evans, absolute magic man. Very dynamic, versatile man. Very quickly after joining, got to meet one of the two sons that are the joint CEOs currently. And I've gotten quite close to one of them in particular, Christopher. And then as I got into my team, I met people from different walks, whether they were Indian, Honduran, Chilean, Belarusians. So it was, the appeal of joining was that was always going to be the case. I was going to meet people of all different walks of life, of all different ethnicities. And as I mentioned earlier, being from the Rainbow Nation that South Africa is, it was to an extent feeling like I was working at home, but away from home, like 9,000 kilometers away from home. And it seemed like a very welcoming, inclusive environment where I could thrive. And whilst it is in essence a family business with the Evanses, it got a corporate sort of spine to it, which I quite appreciate, because I like strong rules-based organization, but without being draconian, without being unfair or prejudicial. And as I got, because you never truly know everything about your employer before you join, but as I joined, within the first few weeks with the training and the inductions that I was doing with people and culture, etc., I started to learn just how robust the enterprise was, and how there was inclusivity from the LGBTQ plus, from women empowerment, people under 30s. There was just all these different groups, and they all have incredible reach within the organization, and they all have a very, very strong and heard voice. It's all very well to say, I have a voice, but is your voice being heard? And within our environment, within the Collinson Group, those groups of people. Everybody has a home somewhere, and some people have multiple homes. We even have a pets of Collinson Group, so the pets have a little home too. It's great. It really is just a wonderfully warm environment, and we've got a gentleman, Bertie, who just, I think, does a pretty good job in ensuring that as best he can, because, I mean, everybody in this world, we've got a lot of different types of people in this world. He does a really good job of trying to get everybody's voice heard, understood. And I think that's one of the coolest things about having joined the group, and I've been there for going on 1.5 years now, and it's been really, really good. It's wonderful to be able to also go and crack a beer with a junior marketer, for example, on a completely different aspect of the business, just simply because you fall under the Collinson umbrella. It's wonderful. You have something immediately in common. You might not be from the same religion, but you have something already in common, and that not just being the employer, but the vibe. The vibe that is created is that we're one Collinson. We're all in this together. We're in a group perspective. Yes, we have various different divisions, but we all sing from the same hymn sheet, and we all want you to feel like you're a part of this, and that you have, a safe space to express yourself and to be respected.
I think, that sounds like awesome. Like the fact that you can cultivate and create that culture where it is so embodied and so accepting of anyone, for everyone, even pets. My God.
Haven't seen one in the office yet. I say yet, but the Pets of Collinson has quite a few members in that group, a good few hundred members. It's just lovely that they try to think of everything, and where they don't think of something, they're very quick to try and address it and take advice from the staff member who brought it up, because, like you said, we don't know everything in senior levels. We need the buy-in and the progressive thoughts of all our staff to help us progress as an organization across the globe and understand, the nuances of Australian culture and the South Africans who love a bra,
But that's
so we're all different.
Bringing those people together is really, really challenging, and the world's never been smaller. With social media, with everything, the internet, with like the way in which people are working. Like there's people that I know are working in Munich, but where they're based and everything's in the UK, or they're traveling and consistently working from that. I suppose I'm interested, how do you think Collinson embedded that kind of diversity and inclusion kind of culture across it? Because I'm sure there's going to be some CFOs, some FDs, some people in leadership teams that are probably scratching their head going where do I start? Yeah. How do I build that? And how do I, make it such a welcoming thing? So from the bottom up, because I think some businesses do it really well at certain levels. And then it's gone. Or other, some businesses, it might be part of their recruitment drive, but then it kind of goes off the edge of a cliff when people sort of start. How do you think you would go about it, or how do Collinson do it? So
it's a great question. So in my view of how I think Collinson gets it right is it starts with openness and transparency from the top down, because the fish rots from the head down. So if Christopher and David and Colin aren't being accountable to their next level and all the way down, then you can't expect integrity to flourish at the bottom up. So I think that they do a particularly good job, and the board of directors do an impeccable job at the moment of trying to be as accountable and open without causing consternation, because again, you send out a message and to 100 people, 92 might read it one way and 8 might go, panic station, the building's on fire,
I've been there, I've been there where I've sent an email and I mean it the most positive, life affirming, let's do this, let's have a great day, and then I don't know, 80% will read it one way and the other 20% will be oh God, that's thinking.
But I think that the key characteristic really there is to, regardless of how the message is received, is just to give that impression solidly through action that you are open and that you're not playing closed cards with your staff, because that just creates consternation amongst majority of staff, as if they feel that either you don't know what you're doing at the top, or you know what you're doing, but you're not going to tell us. Why aren't you going to tell us? Oh, my job's on the line. People just will,
jump to the 100th degrees. Right?
They will create the reality that suits the narrative of what you're not giving them. So it's really important. That's, again, coming back to the example where I'm at. I believe that by having our town halls, we have surveys where we encourage staff to participate anonymously in giving feedback or asking Q&As, and giving the leadership the opportunity to address these problems or concerns or adopt or adapt with regards to suggestions. That, I think, is what a lot of organizations do try to do. A lot of organizations do try to let their staff feel part of something, but they do it as a tick box exercise for P&C purposes, maybe, and to be politically correct as well, to say, well, we, give our staff a quarterly survey and we let them have their say, but are you actually doing anything about it? Are you actioning those things? And there are specifics that I can see that have come from town halls. Not every single thing comes staff's way, because there's sometimes budgetary constraints. There's sometimes just timing constraints. There's a number of reasons why not everything can be done, obviously. But the reality is that in my world, I'm finding that for the majority of things that get brought up, they are heard, responded to. Might not get the response you like, but they are responded to. Whereas in a number of organizations, you don't know what's going on, and then suddenly something happens and you had no idea it was coming. So whether it is the closing of a division or it is the launching of a new market, either have their annoyances and frustrations. So if closing of a division would freak people out because they think, oh, well, who's next? Am I next? Opening up of a market, for example, could be, well, why haven't they told me? Am I not going to be allowed to apply for that job? So it has negatives on both sides, and it's how you manage that, and it's through the communication.
Yeah, even from a positive, like you said, opening up a new market can be viewed as a negative if it's not clearly communicated. I think sometimes, that's where companies go wrong. You strategize it, but it's like, when was it announced?
Yeah.
Why was it announced then? Why wasn't it told that this is something we're exploring and potentially looking at? And there's kind of that shock and awe. To be fair, we've literally just done a anonymous survey, haven't we? I don't know what the results are yet.
Oh, because it's anonymous to
anonymous. We got 100% score on everything. Everyone's
amazing.
Really, really happy. That's impossible, isn't it? Wish that was the case. But no, it's really interesting.
I will say this as well. Something that it's obviously harder to do in maybe more corporate or listed structures, to have the situation where we have our founder still walk amongst us and talk and ask you how things are going, taking an interest. Like Colin's really good like that. And I haven't dealt a hell of a lot with him, but the dealings I have had with him have been fantastic. And you've got someone with just an absolute plethora of experience sitting in him, and to get time with him and to see the way he rolls is really cool. And as I said, I haven't dealt very much with David, but Christopher has been very involved from the finance perspective for quite some time when I joined, and building relationships with people that are really ultimately the pinnacle of the company, and they are there to have a beer with you. They're at functions. They're not these ivory tower people that you just never hear or see of. They're actually real people on the ground that are part of the team, part of the culture. And it comes back to what I said earlier about, not everybody, you can't have 15 captains on the rugby field. You've got one. And maybe the family is that captain, but they're in the trenches with you. They're sitting there amongst you, not necessarily behind a closed door. They're literally sitting, taking calls in open plan seating and being part of that team, literally walking the walk. And that is very, very rare in my experience in this day and age, is to see people that don't consider themselves, I'm the CEO, I'm going to sit in this office with my Nespresso machine and whatnot. They could very well do so.
Nice.
I know it does sound nice, doesn't it? I wish I could. I wish I had my own desk. But sitting amongst the people and being there and being able to be heard, and people can walk past and see what's on their desk and whatnot. It's a very, very, very I'm in it with you mentality. And I struggled with that at first, because coming from a South African culture where we're quite a conservative people, in my experience, especially in finance, we sit behind office doors and, we'll say we have an open door policy, just come in anytime you want. But the fact is, I'm in an office, and that already is intimidating in its own sense.
It's
because
a barrier to entry.
It is intimidating to some extent. If you're a debtors clerk and you want to come in and say, oh, geez, I'm 62 days over on this account. You got to go into the big boss and sit there in an office and close the door. And it is maybe a bit archaic in some senses, but I also understand that there's a need for certain things with regards to confidentiality of papers and that. But we seem to have got it right, where we have a little bit of a legal office where we can put stuff away and all the rest of it. But when the boys come in, I call them the boys, they come in, they sit amongst us and they work with us. They don't think that they don't present as that they're any better or worse than us. They present as they're a part of our team, and we're in it with you. If we're all winning, we're all winning. And if we lose together. And I love that about them.
Yeah, I think when you've got the leaders and you can see them working, like I said, in the trenches alongside you, and they're visible in the business, I think, some of the larger, and Collinson's obviously, like as a group, if we take it out, is a massive business. To have that opportunity to actually be able to see those leaders is often lost with massive companies, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Like whoever it is in Tahiti.
Yeah.
Just giving a call, making sure the numbers are still aligned and stuff. It's a very different environment. I do think that helps with a culture from that perspective, because you can see that they're aligned to it. And I'm sure they show the values that, you hope that the majority of the staff show within the business, and that only helps in terms of staff retention.
Yeah, I can certainly see it. I mean, there's always going to be a degree of churn in most big companies, and certainly in London, because people will jump for a pound. Like it is what it is.
I mean, in London, literally.
Yeah. So the trick there is to not play the catch up game constantly with the paycheck, but to create a safe space and a welcoming space for people to want to be involved and want to come into an office, want to hang out with people from the various different backgrounds and learn and grow. And I believe that we get that pretty good right. I really do. Are there rooms for improvements? Of course there will always be, but in the large chunk of it, I think that the culture has been set so nicely and is so evergreen, growing, and I'm learning more about different groups that I never had any exposure to before, and it's just so open and welcoming to learn about those different groups of people and interest groups and charitable causes. We are involved in so many charitable causes, and the family's really good about co-sponsoring. If you bring up, for example, I'm going to do a fundraiser and run a certain race, they'll match you pound for pound for what you raise. So they're pretty good about doing stuff like that. These are the kind of things. So it's not just about driving profit. Make no mistake, I'm sure they love a good bottom line and a bit of cash flow.
Of course. That's why you're there.
They're not there for haircuts. So, but it's a great responsibility that sits on their shoulders to understand that there are, if there's say 2,000 staff across the globe, that's probably the better part of 10,000 mouths to feed, that they are responsible for, by making sure that they ethically and correctly run their business for everybody to gain.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the things is the fact that, they're still coming to the office shows, like, let's be honest, they probably don't have to work anymore. They don't have to come into the office. I don't
know. Maybe they feel they do. I don't know. But
they come into the office to spite.
Presumably they are comfortable, but I speak under correction. But regardless of whether they are or they aren't, to your point, they choose to be there and they choose to keep their finger on the pulse live. And we have a hybrid working scenario. So a few days in the office, few days remote. We have some really great package benefits that we offer around that too. But the attraction for me ultimately around culture was that whether you are the receptionist or you are the CEO, there's a presence and there is an energy that is being brought in and a positivity. And even when things were looking tough when I joined, I mean, it was just outside of COVID, and travel was opening up again and whatnot. It was a really, really tough time to be in our business, and to have weathered the storm speaks volumes about the strength of the brand. It speaks about the strength of the leadership. And it's just, yeah, as I said, it's just great to see them come in and to learn from them.
Mm. Well, I think it's one of those things, like you said, COVID was such a challenge period for everything. The fact that, they were still investing when it came out of that period, whereas, let's be honest, like a lot of businesses just kept consolidating. Yeah. I won't name, but there was one company that literally consolidated, so they literally had pretty much no one in their finance team.
Oh,
and
wow.
it was like literally COVID opened and started making money. They were hiring for all these, because the poor people that were left working all these hours, all these things, and stuff like that, and they were just hiring. And unfortunately, that led to the market. A lot of candidates speak, a lot of things like that. Their reputation was kind of shot because of that continuous consolidation period. And I think you have to show your culture in the hard times, not just the good times. And I think that's resonant of like success, and that's what keeps people bought into those businesses.
And also, I mean, in the current economic environment, both locally and abroad, I know that there are a few companies that are still constraining and are relinquishing a lot of their perks, are relinquishing staff, and it's really it's a sad situation to be in. It's as a result of many factors, inflation, etc. Just not being able to maybe forward plan as well. Some organizations have been quite in the moment planning, and they haven't had the ability to foresee a 36-month rollout of how the businesses should be, conducted. And whilst none of us have crystal balls, you've got to have some sort of vision as to where you're going. Going back to the Springboks, we had a new coach 18 months before the World Cup. The vision was to win the World Cup. It wasn't just we'll just rock up and hope for the best. And
I thought it was.
Yeah.
I mean, the results
I think after having lost to Italy and a few others along the way, we looked like rubbish. But, Rassie Erasmus came in with a plan and he got a captain on side. It's the same as if you go back to 2004 when we came out of a horrendous 2003 Rugby World Cup and Jake White took over and he got John Smith as his captain. He made that appointment, and a lot of people would have said that John wasn't perhaps the best hooker in the country. Bismarck du Plessis was probably better than him, but again, debatable. But he chose a captain that he could work with that would get the team on side, and inevitably got to the 2007 World Cup and won it.
That was when Mark Cueto scored the try. That wasn't a try.
I mean, it's very debatable. I'm sure I saw some whitewash on his boot, but
who knows? But the team analogies. You definitely love sport. There's been a lot of analogies.
Yeah.
Was it the bees?
Catch more bees with honey.
Catch more bees with honey. I'm gonna use that.
It's a very good saying, and it's a very true saying. You do catch more bees with honey. Ask Winnie the Pooh.
True. One of my faves. Well, I mean, we've covered a lot here. We've obviously gone through your career journey, perhaps moving into industry, moving to UK, and all the different parts of that, culture, leadership and stuff. Is there anything, I know you said you had some notes, so I didn't know if there's anything you felt
I was having a look at my notes earlier and we've covered it quite well. It's fantastic to partner with you guys. There are a lot of agencies out there, as you're aware, and a lot of them are quite thin on understanding, first of all, finance as an industry, commerce as a broader concept within the finance realms, and as we touched on, what it is that a chartered accountant does, whether it's a chartered accountant from New Zealand or South Africa or Singapore, understanding the scope of what we can cover and do, and the various different degrees and transferability of skills. That's one thing we didn't touch on, is whether I've worked in hospitality or telecommunications, as my CV will show, I have skills that I can transfer that are technical as well as soft into travel and technology and loyalty as I'm sitting in now. I had none of that on my CV in particular, and yet I was hired because the skill set that I have shown to be able to go between different industries. I mean, you don't get more different than going from hospitality into telecommunications. And to see that the person has gone from handling a region to then being a C-suite level shows that the person has something there that they can obviously deploy into an organization that is willing and warm and receptive enough to take that on board. I think I'm grateful for, as I mentioned, James and Nicola in the past for taking the opportunity also off the back of my character, because I'm a very outspoken, very say what I think person professionally. I don't do it brazenly, which I don't think sometimes sits very well in corporate, and in particular in London corporate. They just want a worker bee and get stuck in and do your bit. You're loving the bees, aren't you? Oh, I'm all about the bees. Save the bees, damn it. Save the bees. Leave water on a table for them or something. No, so it's so incredible to see how certain agencies just don't have a grasp of that. And not to name any in particular, but name them all. But there are some good ones out there, and there are some bad ones, as with any industry. And it's great to be able to have this opportunity to speak with you and to partner with your company. And
I really appreciate you obviously coming down. To be fair, and that's why we wanted to specialise in finance. Like our training programs, pretty intense. And from our standpoint, we have to understand the product that we're representing. Yeah. I agree. There are some agencies that, they put a chartered accountant in the same box, everything. Whereas you've got some people that are really good on the commercial side, business partnering, getting stakeholders involved and understanding how they can better make strategic decisions. Yeah. And your financial reporting, they just love all the IFRS, UK GAAP and stuff. And you have people that amalgamate the two, and our role is to consult. That's why it's into consultants, because we want to consult with our clients. Sometimes they're like, they must have this experience. But if we're doing our role right, and if we've vetted our candidates effectively, we should have a great insight in terms of someone that might have the transferable skills, as you mentioned, but may not have that one box ticked. And it's our role to get that person an interview or try and make sure that the client meets with that person so they can make their own decision, because we are in the people business. It's not just because someone's CV looks great. So many times I've met with people that have a great CV and you're like, Jesus Christ, like how what happened there? And other times I've met with people that have their CV's like a page with just bullet points, and you meet with them, you're like your background's incredible, like why are you not showing off about this? And that's part of our role. I think, a lot of the time people think recruiters get on the phone, give them a call, get them a job, happy days. But there's a lot of work that goes into it, and I appreciate you coming down. I think for me, that's it. I mean, it's...
or something to that extent.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we've been...
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
As dumb as a stump.
So, not sending everything must be aligned to certain, or certain gifts, or have certain gifts that are adopted.
Your attitude stinks.
I think that's scarring. It's like if you
hectic
stuff like that, and they were just hiring. Sorry,
we have somebody crawling under the table.
Yeah, I was wondering what was going on there.
Is this normal for a podcast?
No. That's a different podcast.
I feel like I'm Howard Stern.
Been a lot. How long was that? Almost in Joe Rogan, hour and a half. We smashed it.
It can't be Joe Rogan and Elon Musk, because we're not smoking. We're not smoking a joint. So
not yet. That's when the video goes down. But really appreciate you coming down, guys that have listened. Obviously, please subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, website, other bits. But thank you very much, and speak to you soon.
Thank you. Cheers.
Done. How was that for you, mate?